Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Can I get a +1 that my audio is coming through well? Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, good evening. Okay. I'm honored to be speaking to you all today about why the pray emoji is not the high five emoji, but also why the white flag with a question mark is pride. If I could get a show of hands from everybody in Twitch chat and in Discord chat, uh, has anybody used emojis before? Do you see any of your favorite emojis in here? Do you identify with perhaps the pirate emoji or the chef emoji? Um, I also see an emoji that looks a little broken in here. It's not quite rendering right. There's something a little missing. It's got a question mark. I don't really know what's going on. We'll get back to that one in a little bit. But first, hello, I'm AndyTuba. Uh, I work as a software engineer and engineering manager, but mostly I use a lot of emojis in Slack because I spend a lot of time in Slack and in Twitch and in internet. And I also like using emojis in email. They're great because text is very tiny and emojis speak a lot more. I also like squids and octopuses. They're really cool. If you want to talk about that later, we got a channel for it. So, what are you in for in the next couple of minutes? So we're going to talk about some technical specifications, how technology represents people in popular media, including in your phone, under your fingers, on your computers, and in Slack and in Twitch, etc., etc. We're also going to talk a little bit about diversity and inclusion in popular media and some stereotypical representations of people in media. Mostly, we're going to be talking about a lot of emojis. So, let's back up really quick. What is an emoji? Just to like set the foundation out. So we've got emojis. They're actually a glyph or an image. Um, there's a whole pile of emojis. They've been growing over and over the years, and they are specified by the Unicode Consortium. They add some every year, and as I said, this is a specification. We have many companies building their own implementations of emojis. So why do we have specifications? Why do we have Unicode? So Unicode, as some of the programmers in the audience are probably going, oh no, Unicode. Let's take it back, I don't know, 30, 40 years to when some people in Japan were trying to send text to each other, not just using like the standard Latin set, but one person's phone would encode their kanji, and their katakana, and their hiragana using one way of encoding it, and then it would get turned into something, some code points, whatever, and then somebody else's phone, they would try to read it, and it would come out kind of messy because my phone would speak it one way, and your phone would try and read it another way, and it would just come out kind of gibberish. So, voila, somebody said, let's make a standard, a specification, something we can all agree on. And specifically, the people who did that are the Unicode Consortium. So this is a group that's based out of South Bay, down in the Bay Area, south of San Francisco. And they established this in 1991 to say, hey, we are going to write one big spec that encompasses all the different kinds of text and images, or like the glyphs that you want to potentially send from one device to another, so that you can specify, here's the image that's supposed to be rendered, and here's the way that we encode it, like what do we turn it into to send it over the wire. So they have space for a lot of different kinds of text. We have space for the Latin character set like A to Z, lowercase a to Z as well. We also have space for a lot of Japanese characters, both the katakana and all of the bigger characters, that we also see in Chinese. You'll see like Korean characters throughout it. They also put in space for currency symbols like the euro sign, the austral sign. The austral sign's a really fun one. It's an Argentinian currency that was used for 6 years It actually stopped being used right after the very first Unicode version went out. Spesmilo is a super cute one that is used in Esperanto, but they also added the Bitcoin sign because people like to talk about virtual currency as well. So back to emoji. Now that we've set what is Unicode, Unicode being a of glyphs, like how do you depict a character, mapped to how do you encode this character. So emojis are not just like black and white text, it is cute images like a picture frame or a smiley face or a bunch of people. So the Unicode spec says, here's what the glyph is supposed to look like, here's how you encode it, and then we're going to leave it to you, the people actually making the devices, putting out the operating systems, putting out the internet media platforms. You make the art for it. So, as I said, we have a bunch of cute pictures. The way that the Unicode spec says it, it'll describe it as like, here's the title, and they'll have like a recommended like way to draw it and like kind of a reference image. But mostly they specify what is the Unicode, the code point that you send over in your like your source code. So kind of some of the older ones are like picture frame, the octopus, the woman's really basic one. We have a newer one, it's a person with a headscarf. We have a rainbow. So as I said, different companies get to depict this art in different ways. So even though it's, you're supposed to represent a rainbow, then like Apple will have this kind of shiny rainbow. Microsoft will do kind of a more flat version, which is their house style. WhatsApp puts a little pot of gold cloud in there. Docomo has a very stylized cloud. Docomo is just kind of, it's another, I think, a Japanese emoji, a different cell phone. So we've got these differences between like, okay, we have like the canonical text, like the representation, what it's supposed to look like, but we also have how do people represent, or how do people interpret this art? Because, even in plain text, people get confused how they're talking to each other. In images, there's even more variety in how do you interpret something. So it's pretty commonly understood that like you're smiling, this is probably like you're happy, but there's this hilarious emoji kind of misconfusion where if you've got like the like I'm feeling triumphant. If as a person who I didn't really watch a lot of anime, I'm not embedded in Japanese culture, so I read that as like I'm steaming, I'm furious. But like here, where we have kind of a shared context of symbologies with the rainbow meaning like queer pride, then that's kind of an easy sell. But if you are talking to somebody who's not as aware of queer symbology, they just look at the rainbow and they go, "Oh yes, I don't know, like what do you see after the rain goes away?" And we're like, maybe we have a different cultural context here. So, and even like tighter cultural context references, if you do software development, there's this phrase of like ship it, like take it, send it out, give it to people to use. And on GitHub, that's represented as a squirrel with a fedora. I don't know why. If you work with me at Reddit, we have an internal emoji system for doing code review, which is, hey, I have some code that I want somebody to look at. Please take a look at it. Somebody will say, okay, like it looks pretty good, but like you need to like trim it up a little bit. I mean, it's this whole complex system. It only really makes sense if you've been at Reddit for a few months. So, we can take emojis and build them on each other. There's a lot of ways that the emoji system has been built up over the last 20 years where like we have your base system, you have modifier ones that have been added on. So one modification that was added a few years ago was representing what is your skin color, not ethnicity, not race, but like very specifically your skin color. And this is based on, there's a dermatologist named Fitzpatrick who was kind of a seminal dermatologist, or he had a lot of representation, a lot of good work in the last 40 years. So he came up with this scale, or he developed the scale that says basically how susceptible are you to getting sunburned? And so you can have light skin tone, medium, dark. And then when you combine that with a regular, like a person skin tone emoji, then you get a representation that is a woman with this particular skin tone. There's also gender representation in emoji. So going back to the very beginning, it was usually like man or woman. More recently, they added kind of a non-gender, just person or child. So there's a lot of emoji that aren't just like a person or like a person doing activity. There will be like the sleuth or like dancer or facepalm. But people who aren't just wearing dresses go out dancing. So the Emoji Consortium more recently said, oh yeah, we should add representation for male-bodied, female-bodied, or presenting as, plus kind of just generic. And then the way that they encode that is they will have the base emoji, like the haircut emoji, zwidged with the male symbol to represent I am a male presenting person getting a haircut. Wait a second, zwidge, that's kind of a weird word. So what's a zwidge? So zwidge is another particular character in the Unicode set. It is a zero width joiner. It is zero width means like it doesn't take up any space, but it still shows up in the source code, and it's pronounced zwidge because the ZWJ. And what it's supposed to encode is you take one emoji and you take the following emoji and you squish them together and you represent that somehow. So the man getting the haircut emoji is the haircut base emoji zwidged with the male sign. So there are plenty of other examples of this over the years, like the woman technologist, which is super cool emoji. It's basically just a woman chilling behind a laptop. And that is encoded literally as a woman zwidged with a laptop. And we squish it together and get woman technologist. So you can build these together. So you can have a woman with a medium dark skin tone zwidged with a laptop, and you squish it all together and you get one single image that is woman technologist with medium dark skin tone. It's kind of like Java classes, but a little more interesting. So as I mentioned, emoji has been growing over and over and over the years. So we've got some cool new emojis that have come in this year, like the transgender pride flag. So the Unicode version 13 that was released in February of this year included an emoji for the trans flag. And the way that it's encoded under the surface is the waving white flag, which has been there for years, zwidged with the transgender symbol, which you can see depicted as kind of a combination of several gender symbols kind of all squished together. But technology sometimes takes a little time to catch up to the new specifications. So you might see it represented on some platforms as kind of what it decomposes to, which would be, you have that underlying the white flag, which basically every device can support the white flag symbol. But some devices support the transgender symbol, some platforms don't. So if you've been seeing on Twitter for the last few months, people will put in their bios, they'll have the transgender flag showing up, but it'll be rendering as white flag plus the transgender symbol. That's because Twitter, which runs their own emoji set, didn't yet support the transgender flag specifically, but they would show the base characters, the white flag, and the transgender symbol. So your device, like your phone, might have support for these two characters individually. But if you're using a slightly older device that doesn't yet know about the transgender symbol because it hasn't been updated yet, you get the question mark. So if you see white flag plus question mark, it might be the transgender flag once you update your phone. Twitter actually just barely released their support for this. So the screenshot on the left is there's a Unicode tracking account, and they saw, all of the new Unicode 13 stuff coming out and said, hey, let's test it out and see how Twitter has support for it. So I took the screenshot on the left a couple weeks ago. It wasn't working, but then one of the Twitter devs dropped in and was like, hey, coming soon. So I took the screenshot on the right this morning, and you can see, this is on the Twitter website, all of the new Twomoji, like the Twitter emoji 13 characters render great. The apps have yet to be updated, but it's great that we have this representation on web already. So back to the title of the talk. So This emoji is canonically encoded as folded hands or person with folded hands. And if you look at some of the older art, like if you go back 20 years, 10 years, you will see like a cute little thing with like, you've got like a ray of light, or you'll see very explicitly like somebody with their head bowed, somebody bowing. And these days it's a bit more simplified into just like two hands pressed together. So the older version I feel is a bit more explicitly kind of referencing the cultural backings of the symbol, while the new version is a little more, let's say, versatile. So depending on where you come from, like what is your cultural background, like are you familiar with this image where it's, your two hands pressed together versus like, hey, I'm giving somebody a high five and they're giving me a high five back, like which one are you more familiar with? What is your context? And we see the same kind of problem with various emojis across the set. So I pulled a few here. We have a cake. We have what looks like kind of the more you know comet. And we have like somebody who's like super sassy. But canonically, like according to the original definitions, this first one is a Japanese Christmas cake. It has strawberries on it. It's not for your birthday, it's for... The star is actually like the dizzy star, like, oh, I took a knock to the head, now I have like stars floating around my head. And the third one is the information desk person, but I see it used a lot more for like, really? Or are you kidding me right now? In the end, I would like to give you just a few little things to take away from it. Just kind of like, here's our technical underpinnings of, we have the Unicode Consortium. They have defined a specification. They say, here are all the emojis that we support. Here's all the text we support. Here's how we would like it to be rendered. And then different companies can take on that definition and drive their own art. We also have these additions to the emoji set where you can take a regular person emoji, like a person running, or like two people standing together, and say, hey, I would like this emoji to be rendered using this skin tone. So this person should be very light-skinned or very dark-skinned. And then once we have all of these like person emojis, we have activity emojis, or we have like flag emojis, or other things like, okay, we have two existing emojis in the set, and we would like to combine them and make a new emoji without defining a whole new code point. So we can take, say, the woman emoji and the laptop emoji and create a new image, technologist. And in the end, we have various cultural contexts that we come from when we are dealing with, like, how do we interpret this art? So, it's okay if you're talking to somebody who they parse this as high five. Like, if you're talking to them, you mean it as high five, they understand it as high five, cool, go for it. But if you're talking to somebody you're not quite sure what their cultural references are, or if you definitely know what their cultural references are, and you misuse an image, consider like, what are you trying to communicate to them? And more importantly, how do you think that they're going to interpret it? How will your words land with them, but how will your images, how will your emoji land with them? But in the end, be excellent to each other. Like, just be good and be considerate of who you're talking to, how they understand stuff, like what's going on in their brain. Can be empathetic to what references they use. And if you're not sure exactly what's going on in their head, and you have that trusted rapport with them, or if you can talk to somebody who you trust to give you a good answer, who has volunteered to help you clarify things, just go ask them. Like, we all have our brains, we have what's going on in our heads. We have been built up with whatever we grew up with in the last 20, 30, 50 years, whatever. But, there's a lot of people out there. We can just go talk and exchange our art and exchange our cultural references. So, thank you for hanging out. I'll be on Discord in a sec to drop in a bunch of resources. I'll be on Twitter at AndyTuba if you want to go chit chat after the talk. And Thank you all for having me. It's been swell. Back to Vanessa.